Imagine a grand mansion in rural France, elegant, opulent, built in the early 20th century for a wealthy family. Now imagine that same home, decades later, standing blackened by fire, abandoned, stripped of its treasures, and left as a silent ghost on the hillside. That's the story of the Château de Chaumont in Creuse, but it doesn't end there. Today, the chateau is slowly rising again, thanks to passionate restorers who refuse to let history vanish in smoke. Welcome back to Chateau Walls. Today, we're diving into the dramatic tale of the Château de Chaumont, a story of grandeur, tragedy, and rebirth. Section 1, Origins of Chamont. First, let's set the stage. The Château de Chaumont isn't a medieval fortress, despite what the word chateau might suggest. It was actually built in the early 1900s, at a time when wealthy industrial families across France were commissioning large, manor-style homes. Chamont sits astride two small French communes, Mainsat and La Serre-Boussière-Vieille, in the Creuse department. It's a peaceful, rural setting, far from Parisian hustle, chosen precisely for its calm beauty. With its turrets, grand stone facade, and sweeping grounds, Chaumont represented the kind of upper-middle-class luxury that defined the Belle Époque, and unlike older castles, this one came equipped with modern comforts of its era: running water, heating, and architectural flourishes blending traditional grandeur with turn-of-the-century practicality. But what makes Chaumont so fascinating is not just who built it, but what happened inside its walls over the decades. Section 2, Wartime Years. During World War II, Château de Chaumont took on a much more human role. While France was under occupation, large estates like Chaumont often became safe havens, makeshift hospitals, or temporary shelters. Chaumont was used as a refuge for children. Imagine that, the laughter of young voices echoing in halls built for aristocratic dinners. The building, designed for leisure, became instead a sanctuary. In a time of chaos, it offered protection, and though not all of those stories survive in detail, the fact that Chaumont sheltered the vulnerable adds a remarkable chapter to its history. It's these layers, wealth, war, and survival, that make the chateau's later tragedy even more heartbreaking. Section 3, the 1986 fire. Fast forward to the 1980s. By then, Château de Chaumont had already seen shifts in ownership and purpose, and like many large estates, maintenance was becoming increasingly difficult. Then came 1986. A devastating fire ripped through the building. Details on the cause are scarce. Some say faulty wiring, others suggest negligence, but the result was catastrophic. The chateau's interiors, with their wood paneling, staircases, and historic details, were consumed by flames. Locals still remember the black smoke that rose above the trees that day. In mere hours, decades of history and craftsmanship were reduced to ash. What remained was a shell, scorched stone walls, gaping windows, and a roof that had collapsed inward. The fire didn't just destroy a building, it stripped the chateau of its soul. Furniture, art, records of its past, gone. For many, this was the end of Chaumont. And for years, it looked that way. Section 4, Years of Abandonment. After the fire, Chaumont sat empty. Imagine a once proud mansion, now open to the wind and rain. Roof beams exposed. Ivy crawling through windows. Floors collapsing. For decades, the chateau was left to rot. And in rural Creuse, abandoned houses are not rare, but an abandoned chateau is something different. Explorers and curious passers-by began sneaking inside. Photos from the 1990s and early 2000s show heartbreaking scenes: burnt staircases dangling into the void, fireplaces blackened with soot, entire wings gutted. Nature began reclaiming Chaumont. Birds nested in the rafters, trees grew in the courtyard. What was once a symbol of wealth became a haunting ruin. If this were a novel, this would be the tragic ending. But Chaumont wasn't finished yet. Section 5, The Road to Restoration. Enter the modern era. In recent years, new owners stepped in with one mission: to bring Château de Chaumont back to life. One of the figures associated with this revival is Dan Preston, known from the YouTube channel Escape to Rural France. Dan, originally a gardener by trade, has taken on the enormous task of restoring Chaumont. For viewers, his channel has become a window into what it really means to breathe life back into a burned-out ruin. And let's be clear, restoring a chateau is not glamorous. It's scaffolding, power tools, endless dust, surprise leaks, and repairs that cost small fortunes, but it's also deeply inspiring. Every repaired roof tile, every repointed wall, every room reclaimed from decay is a victory. What's most powerful about Dan's approach is that he doesn't sugarcoat the process. He shows the setbacks, the frustrations, the sheer scale of the work. And yet, you can see the chateau slowly transforming from ruin to residence again. Section 6, Why Chamont Matters. Now, you might ask, why bother? Why pour time and money into saving a burned, forgotten chateau in rural Creuse? Because Chamont is more than a house. It's a living piece of history. It represents a period of French architecture and society that would otherwise disappear. It holds stories of wealthy industrialists, of children finding shelter in wartime, of tragedy by fire, and of resilience through restoration. Every chateau that survives into the 21st century becomes a cultural anchor. It connects us to the past, educates us about how people lived, and inspires us with the possibility of renewal. And frankly, it's also just beautiful. Section 7, The Future of Chaumont. So, what's next for Chamont? The restoration is far from finished. There are roofs to secure, interiors to rebuild, and countless details to restore, but the trajectory is clear. This chateau will not remain a ruin. It's being slowly reimagined as a home, a space for community, and perhaps one day a heritage site that visitors can walk through again. The fire of 1986 nearly ended Chamont's story. But thanks to modern visionaries, it's becoming a story of rebirth instead. Outro 2000 hours. Château de Chaumont reminds us that history is fragile. One fire can erase centuries in an instant. But it also shows us that history can be rescued, not perfectly, not easily, but piece by piece, brick by brick. The rebuilding of Château de la Land has not been without issues and comments from viewers. At the beginning, viewers were worried about safety. Later, they become worried about the cost and not seeing the garden. But even to pit all of this, Château de Chaumont never gave up on its mission. A mission of brilliance and of hard work. A mission of perseverance and keeping on even with adversity and tremendous problems arise. Dan has done a great job with his work. If you've enjoyed this journey into the fire and resurrection of Chaumont, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And let me know in the comments, would you take on the challenge of restoring a ruined chateau? Or would you rather admire from afar? This has been Chateau Walls, where every stone tells a story. See you in the next video.